Hi everybody, welcome back to the Intercooler podcast. This is episode 247 with Dan Prosser and Andrew Frankel, and we're joined this episode in the studio by Mark Sumpter. Mark, people might not know your name, but they'll certainly know Paragon Porsche. It's the company that you founded 30 odd years ago.
93.
Yeah, and it's one of the leading Porsche specialists in the country. And so that's what we're talking about this week is Porsches. We'll talk about racing, we'll talk about road cars, we'll talk about the very, very special Porsches. And to get us started, I'd love to hear the origin story of Paragon Porsche. And to give us the sort of context, I suppose. Where did it all come from? Where did your thing for cars come from?
My father was always messing around with cars. It was never his career, but he was very handy with cars. So, back in the day where everyone had a Haynes manual and everyone would be working on their cars at weekends. And I think everyone had a welder as well because cars used to be quite rusty. So he was quite often putting seals on his Cortina or whatever. So I was always fascinated with cars. Didn't do very well at school, left school when I was 16, but managed to get an apprenticeship, first of all with an Austin Rover dealer, which I was proud to be doing it. It was on the YTS scheme at the time. Day release at college, all that sort of thing. Just really wanted to get...
So this would have been in the 80s? Or?
Yeah, mid-80s, 85.
Yeah.
So I was 16.
So I'm just trying to think what Austin Rover went. So this was sort of Montego, Maestro era?
Yeah, the first car they let me loose on was the Metro.
Yeah.
Which was my first job. I was really proud, and they sent me to the parts department and said, "You've got your first job. It's a recall on the Metro." The people were getting out and their turn-ups on their trousers were opening the bonnet release cable.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, so I went there and with my, said, I've got a recall to the parts man, and, where's my parts? And he gave me a piece of paper with a picture of a hacksaw and a dotted line halfway through the release handle. And my job was to cut half the release handle off.
That's a great fix, isn't it?
Yeah,
I bet it worked, though.
So that was it. I was doing that, and about a year into that, I got friendly with a guy that ran a rolling road workshop, a bit of racing. It was called Intermark Tuning in a little industrial estate in Uckfield, and I was doing a bit of Saturday work for him to sort of bolster my £25 a week YTS wage. And he offered me, he said, "Look, finish your apprenticeship with us." And he was working on Porsches and Ferraris and a lot more interesting stuff.
More interesting than a Metro. Hard to believe.
It didn't take long to make that decision. So I went down and worked with him, and his next door neighbour that ran the body shop was racing an old 911, which I knew nothing about at all, but just was fascinated. It was in the days we had a coach with the ramps, and he had converted a coach into a race truck. So I'd see him on a Friday afternoon.
So you weren't particularly a Porsche bloke yourself. You didn't sort of identify with that at all.
No, I was a Ford Escorts and Anglias.
Yeah,
that was it. And actually, the other side there was a kit car shop. Where they used to put together kit cars, Duttons and things like that. And there was a guy there that had a Bubble Arch Mark 1 Escort rally car.
Wow!
So it was going to go one way or the other. But I was fascinated with these. The 911, and it was obviously a pretty affluent time in the late 80s. So you were seeing, that it was really exciting to sort of see what was out there and available. That I guess that was. I didn't know at the time. I didn't suddenly think that's what I want to do. But I think that was where I, if I think back, that really made an impression on me. So. After I'd done my apprenticeship, I set up on my own as a mechanic. Had rented an old chicken shed type building, which there's plenty of in Sussex, and a disused barn. Set up on my own and would service cars and prepare cars for a local dealer, used car dealer.
And these were any cars?
Everything, yeah. A lot of XR2s and 3s, that type, hot hatches, and all sorts, And I used to, in the preparation of these cars for this deal, I used to have to take them for an MOT, and took them to a guy, local MOT shop, and he offered me his forecourt. So after about a year, I rented his forecourt at the MOT centre So that's sort of, so I'd done my apprenticeship, worked on cars for probably 6 years, but there was a lot of fun at the front of the garage at the time, on the forecourt. So I thought I'd do that. But kept my hand in with mechanicals as well, and it was there that I met a guy that loved Porsches, and it was then that I bought my first Porsche.
What was it?
928 automatic gold, orange interior, or whatever it was. And he also bought one which his was manual, metallic brown with a brown interior, manual, and which he then painted guards red, which looked really cool. And we just, we'd obviously, he would run the body shop. I was at the front of the building doing my car sales, and but any spare time we'd be messing around with our own cars. And a few years later, we were in our early 20s, and everything seemed achievable. Nothing, no concerns that we'd fail at anything at that stage. And a local garage came up for sale, and we were, we just really wanted to do Porsches. So that was early 90s, and we just decided to buy it until we'd spoke to the bank, and they said, no, you're not going to buy it because we're not going to lend you any money. So we ended up doing a deal where we rented it for a couple of years until we had some accounts, and then we went back and bought it.
And was it Paragon back then?
Yeah.
And you're still there now?
Well, it was called Five Ashes Service Station, so we renamed it.
Yeah.
At the start of it, I was racing a little bit with VW Beetles. So we did some Beetles and Porsches for a couple of years. And then, although we started it in that recession, we were busy because we were really keen. We were quite cheap, and a lot of the other established dealers had sort of packed up, in the recession. So although we started it in a hard time, we became quite established quite quickly because other dealers had gone. He stayed. It was a partnership for about 5 years, and then sadly he was ill. And couldn't work the hours that we were both working. So we bust the partnership up at sort of late 90s. And
just talk to me a bit about those early. I mean, you're a young lad. You said you've set up business on your own. It must have been incredibly hard work. Was it always fun as well?
It was really good fun. It was hard work all the way through. It was really good fun for the first couple of years because we weren't as serious as we should have been. We were working hard, but we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It became quite serious when I sort of saw the potential that actually we could do a much better job, take this really seriously, and I guess I had a family quite young, so it became more serious quicker for me than it did him, if you like.
Did you always have this? I mean, I think of Paragon now. I think the reputation is that you only really deal in the best cars. You only take on. If somebody buys a car from you, there's a reassurance that that the car will be as good an example of that kind of car as you're likely to find. But did you always, from the outset, want to make sure to position yourself there that you were only going to deal with the really good stuff, or was it a situation where you just buy and sell anything that came along because you had a living to earn?
A bit of both. I'm quite discerning for my own cars, so yes. I definitely got an eye for detail, and it drives me mad if I see something I don't like or something that's wrong on a car or whatever. But no, early on it was a steep learning curve. So early on, we made some mistakes in the first 3 to 5 years or something, and then we started to see the potential of the business. And I think it was fairly gradual, but I think that definitely by the end of the 90s, we decided we didn't want to just be busy because we were cheap. We wanted people coming to us because they wanted, they respected us and they wanted.
You were good.
Because we were good. We employed a couple of Porsche experienced technicians, and I think that was probably the turning point with the workshop. I guess that we started enjoying trying to make things as good as they could be.
Yeah.
I mean, we still tried to do older cars, so you have to be careful. You know, obviously, what you spend. If if I look at last year, we still sold quite a few cars under £20,000. So
Did you?
yeah, we still sell an older Boxster or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, we really like to. So you have to be, you know, you've got to be careful. You can't. You know, we're at the top end price wise.
Yes.
You know, we're not cheap. But if you know, there's only so much you can ask if you've got a 986 or something. So
Yes.
Yeah.
you know, but we really enjoy trying to find those special cars, and
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a friend of ours, who you know, of course, tells a story. It's the early 90s. He's got his first Porsche, a 928, and he loves it, but he has to let it go because he's got a young family, another baby coming, I think. So he has to trade it in for an Espace, a Renault Espace, of course. And so he does a deal with a chap he's never met before, working out of an old petrol station near Tunbridge Wells that still had the petrol pumps there.
yeah.
And that was you, and that was Paragon Porsche. And 30 odd years later, you are now one of the leading specialists in the country. And goodness me, you backed the right horse with Porsche. Imagine if you'd started a TVR specialist.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be
No,
here.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and I have friends that do
Really?
that you know, TVR, but also Ferrari and things like
Yeah.
that. And they have, you know, it's hard in the winter. Most of our customers use their cars,
Yeah, year round,
you know,
I'm sure.
year round, so that really does help.
But it wasn't obvious that Porsche was the company to back in 1993, Andrew. What state was Porsche in?
1993.
Early 90s.
Yeah, not good. I mean, they were making. So they were making cars that were, you know, very well engineered, but they were losing huge amounts of money on them. I don't think in sort of the mid 1990s you'd have found many people who would think that Porsche, it had a great name, obviously an amazing reputation, but I don't think there were many people who thought that it would survive as an independent. And as we know, they had to completely. I mean, they got the Japanese consultants in, told them to completely change the way they do business, and that resulted in Boxsters and 996s and that sort of thing. But yes, it was at the time. I mean, I think a 993 which presumably those were the Porsches that were new, when 964s. Right?
964, yeah. I mean, but the RSs and things like that, they were discounting them heavily when we started Paragon. You know, the 964 RS was. I mean, there's one on the market at the moment that's maritime blue, but Porsche couldn't sell it. It was a black car and they couldn't sell it. So part of the deal to get the guy to buy the car was that we'll colour change it for you, you know, as a new car. So they did quite a few colour changes at Reading.
Just to shift them.
Just to shift some cars, yeah. And when you sometimes look at some 964s, it can be quite confusing. You're ordering parts and there are K registrations, so sort of 93 cars, and when you check the VIN number, they were 18 months old when they were sold new.
Yeah.
So they had problems, and we were chatting the other day in the showroom, and just before the Boxster came out, there was only one car that Porsche sold in their showroom, which was a 993 for about a period of 8 months.
Yeah, 'cause everything else
the
had gone,
928, the 68 had all finished.
They'd all gone, yeah.
And the Boxster and the
Hadn't
new
come.
generation hadn't come. So yeah, imagine that. And when you look at their range now,
All they were selling were 993s.
yeah.
It must have been
Which 993 would you like?
It must have been extraordinary over the decades to see how Porsche has evolved into
Yes.
what it is
Yeah,
today.
Yeah.
Goodness me.
But you've only, am I right in saying you've only ever sold Porsche sports cars? Do you ever do Cayennes or Macans?
Occasionally, I always run a Macan, so
Yeah.
so we obviously sold. We tend to turn them over about every year, and then because obviously we'd sell those ourselves, we were offered a few, so we probably sell 3 or 4 Macans a year.
Yes.
No Panameras. I can't think of the last Cayenne. Definitely no battery cars.
Yeah.
We haven't got the facilities for those, so. Yeah, it's 2-door sports cars for us.
Yeah.
And you know, Jamie, who I think you've met.
I know Jamie well.
So
yeah.
Jamie's
he's been with you forever, hasn't he?
31 years,
Yeah.
And Jay's, you know, he's the new boy, he always says. He's 20 years. So,
Yeah.
and we've now got actually a young guy, George, that started 2 years ago. But we buy what we like. You know, we buy the spec and the cars that we like, and it just makes it so much easier to sell those cars because it's.
And presumably you go out and find cars for people as well.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we've got a list, an ongoing list. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we're so passionate about it that sometimes, more recently, if someone comes in, sometimes we've talked them out of the car that's sitting in the showroom, and then we think, why have we done that? Because now we've got to find a car, and we haven't made a sale. But we really try to find the car that's right for the customer, and yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I've got a customer at the moment that's looking for a classic car, and he keeps sending in examples. Obviously he knows I'm looking for him, but I think he's questioning how hard I'm looking, because there's obviously cars that are coming up various sites and things, and he's sending me cars, and I'm having to explain why that's not the car for him.
Yeah.
But so you have to be quite patient. But yeah, we're always looking. We other than really expensive. We've sold a few Carrera GTs on consignment and a few racing cars, but everything else we buy. So we don't do consignment at all. Which is, it's good because we can keep the cars to one standard that way. But it's a slower process, because obviously we buy them, we then fully prep them, and then we start advertising them.
Do you buy them from private individuals? Are you buying them off auction sites?
Private individuals, yeah. There's a couple of dealers that will sell us cars that, as I say, like a few friends in the trade, like Ferrari dealers and things. But other than that, it's customers. We've got a workshop which we've had from day one, so we look after a lot of cars. So, so sometimes it's, we'll be phoning someone that we feel is due a change, because we want their part exchange as well.
Yeah.
So why should someone buy through Paragon? What are you getting? What are you offering over and above a private sale through the what used to be the trade it?
Yeah, I mean, with a private sale, it's a bit of a lottery. You could be lucky, or you could be unlucky. Some people think that they meet someone, they like the person, and they think that person's going to sell them a nice car, but they don't realise that a nice person could have bought a bad car. So you can't judge by turning up at someone's house. You can't make any judgments about the car in their garage. When we spend a lot of time buying the car and investigating the car and the service history as well. There's a lot of cars out there that are low mileage, but just haven't got enough stamps in the book and just aren't correct. So sadly, especially as they get older, and some of the older cars now that are valuable went through a stage when they weren't valuable, and that's quite often when either the wrong people service them or they just don't get serviced. And Porsches will run quite well for 5 or 6 years without getting service, but it does actually, long term, it's hurt the car, and it's definitely hurt the provenance.
Yeah.
So it's a number of things, but it's obviously our experience, as it's what I've done for 35 years, and there's only 2 of us that buy the cars, myself and Jamie, so we've both been there for over 30 years. We're a small team, there's 13 of us, and we're very hands-on. So whilst myself or Jamie will buy the car, but everybody gets involved in that car in the building. So it goes through a number of sort of checks before, and we occasionally we'll get it wrong, and we'll be halfway through the preparation and think this isn't what we thought it was going to be, and then we'll trade the car, so it won't make the retail. So by the time it's got to the showroom, it's gone through a lot of checks from a lot of experienced people. And we prep the car to the best of our ability. So we service them irrespective of when they were last serviced. We're really strict on obviously tyres, brakes, and that's before we get into all the cosmetics. So we've got we deal with 2. We don't own a body shop, but we deal with 2 that we've worked with for years. So we send it to the right places. I mean, I think it's just. It doesn't work for everybody, so but people that want to have the best of any type of car, normally, if they come and see us and we explain what we do and show them what we do, hate to say we make them new because we can't make them new, but it is sometimes. If you came to us and saw a 20-year-old car in the showroom, we'd sit that next to a car that's maybe 2 years old, and they will look the same as far as the condition. There's no excuses.
So they're the best examples. But should we talk a bit about the market and what's going on at the moment? What are the trends? How is demand compared to previous years? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's been good. We had a great year last year. Over the last 12, maybe 18 months, there's been some correction in prices with 992s.
Yes.
That's probably last winter when the 992, I think they probably oversupplied 992 turbos and Turbo S's.
Yeah.
We didn't have any of those in stock, but we had a few 991 Turbo S's and turbos, and obviously it has an effect because,
of course.
Early on people paid premiums for 992 Turbo S's, and it seemed like an overnight correction. People they suddenly went from nearly £200,000 to £150,000.
It's a nuts thing to do, isn't it, to pay overs for a non-limited car?
Yeah.
It does seem like an odd choice.
There was a perfect storm with, obviously with COVID, and then with the microchip problems, and then the wiring loom problems, and people, the appetite for people to buy cars in those times, and I think people. Yeah, in hindsight, I mean, we say hindsight, we could sort of see what's going to happen as well. I think paying over list for anything is a risky thing to do, and I think anyone that pays over list has just got to assume that they're going to lose that premium
because they really want the car.
And that's fair enough.
Porsche aren't silly; they wouldn't price the car 50%.
Yes,
of what it's worth. So. If Porsche is selling a turbo or GT product at a price, that's as much as they think it's worth. And normally, if there's if they don't supply the first batch, if there's not enough cars, they'll up the production for the second batch of cars. And I think that happened a bit as well.
No, definitely. Yeah, with GT products in particular. I mean, there are. Yeah. I think what Porsche have been very clever at is making GT products feel like they're sort of limited edition, very special cars.
Yes.
But they do make quite a few of them, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers, no one knew at the time of, if you look back at 997 and things, we didn't think that they were a limited run of cars. But if you look at GT product, 996, 997, and then you compare it to 991 and 992, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They're really pumping them out now.
Yeah, loads. Yeah. Which I think's good. I do think it's good.
Are we talking double the number of cars, or 4 or 5 times?
5 times. Yeah.
Wow.
I think 991 GT products GT3s were 5 times.
Wow.
997.
Yeah.
Oh, blimey! And I mean, the GT3s and perhaps even the RSs, they're not sort of holding value like they did.
No.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because there are so many more of them. They're more available. But
also the market's different as well. What Mark was talking about the correction of the last 18 months. People are just not. I mean, we've noticed it with things like Dakars, haven't we?
There's no overs market for a Dakar, is there?
But this has only been about the last 5 years that people thought you could buy a car and run it and sell it, without taking a loss. If you look previously to that, like, owning a 911 turbo or something, it's part of the kudos of having that car was that you were rich enough to buy a new turbo and suffer the depreciation. That was all part of it. You were never looked at as thing.
So what you're saying
get on the list
is that what we have, what is happening now is actually normality.
Yes.
Yeah, back to normality.
And it's the way that things have been, which have been abnormal.
Yes. Yeah. No, people didn't buy a 911 RS to make money back in 964 days. You bought them, and then you'd go to a racetrack and you'd see all the Ruby Stone Red and the 968 clubs, and they'd all be where they should be at the track. And I think that's happening again now. I think if someone's ordering a GT3 today, they're likely to be the guy that's going to drive it around the track.
Yeah. Because what they're not doing is sitting on it thinking, if I keep the miles on this really, really low, then I'll be able to sell it for 50 grand more, because that's not the case. So you might as well use it.
Yes.
What about the very, very special cars, the 911Rs, the 911STs? We know how many of those are built. They are built in very limited numbers. Though they still seem to go for very, very strong money, those two.
Yeah. And there's two types of people that are buying them, I think. You know, there's some that are buying them and just want to keep the lowest mileage example and take it to a few cars and coffees, and there's other people that are just saying you only live once, and they're going to have an ST with 10,000, 20,000 miles on or something.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think so.
I think that's great.
I think so.
Yeah,
that's the way to use them, isn't it? Where do you, as the expert in the room, where do you see the value now across the Porsche range? Where's the what's the hidden gem?
Well, I mean, it might just be because we're getting older in the showroom, but when we have these coffee discussions, the value is, you know, the best 911 to have is the one you're going to drive the most, you know, because as you get older, you suddenly realise that having the lowest mileage car isn't, you haven't won with that car.
Yeah, absolutely, you haven't.
And we have quite a lot of customers that push themselves to always, I think it's a normal thing that we all think that the next car is going to be the best car we're going to buy.
Yeah.
And we've had lots of customers that have come in and whether it's GT product or you know, S's or GTS's or whatever, and they're thinking, I want the latest car, and whether it's a monetary thing or just the obviously the more modern, you know, 992s are a softer sort of feel, not the GT cars, but normal S's and things. We're finding that people are getting to the latest car and not enjoying it, and actually coming back at one or two editions.
Oh.
So
wow.
997, end of 997 is really a popular
See, I've always
car.
thought that a rear drive 997 GTS coupe is one of the great 911s.
Yeah.
And they have the newer engines, don't they?
Yes.
Don't have so many issues.
Yeah. And they didn't build, because again, that was a recession, wasn't it, in the sort of 2011.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they registered as many in the UK as they had planned. So you know, it's really confusing when you look at the prices, because we sold a couple of manual two-wheel drive GTSs last year, 997s.
Yes.
They're the same price as a 991.2 turbo. The same price as
wow.
You know, you could buy.
Yeah.
It's like an 85 grand car,
yeah.
and it's such an.
But I understand that.
It's so confusing though when people come in and they say, "So, what age is that one?" You say, "Oh, that's a 2011, but that's dearer than that 2017 GTS." Yep.
Yeah.
But it'll be a cheaper car in the long run, won't it? 'Cause it's going to hold its value, that one.
Yeah, and again, depending on, everybody's different, but depending on what you like, the proportions of that car, the switch gear, is, you know,
A 997
overused
still,
term, but really analog.
Yes.
Well,
A 997 is a lovely thing. Whenever you get back in one, you just think, oh gosh, this is gorgeous.
Yes, yeah. Well, because we have people come to us, because we still sell quite a lot of 993s. And a lot of people come to us and think that that's the car that they want to go back to, and they drive it, and it is old-fashioned, and the pedals being offset, and you know, I love them, but you've really got to love them to, you know, they are old.
Do you want an early or a late 993?
I don't think it makes as much difference as people think. They're Vario RAM or not Vario RAM, really. Ideally, I'd want a two-wheel drive manual, you know, best one I could find. I wouldn't really worry if it was either, to be honest.
Okay.
I like the sports seats in them, and there's other things that I'd probably have over, you know, and the later cars tended to have more options.
So what would you pay for them? Because this is one of the sort of cars that if I live my life a different way, I would love to have exactly what you're talking about, just a manual rear drive 993 Carrera 2.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of money were you talking about for one of those now?
75. Gosh. Yeah.
Strong, isn't it?
But it's cheaper than a 964. You know, good 964 manual coupe
bizarre.
Is 90 to 100.
And that's only in the last 10 years or so, isn't
Yeah.
it? Less than that, probably.
Is that right?
Yeah, they're dearer. Yeah, the 993 is the cheaper of the.
So what is it about the 964? Why do people? Is it seem to be a purer car, or?
I guess that companies like Singer have helped the image of the 964 because it's their choice of car.
Yeah.
It's mainly that I think, I haven't spoken to them about it, but I think it's mainly their choice of car because they can put an F-Series look body on that.
Yes. Which you can't
Easier,
with
which you
993.
can't. In 993, the inner wings slope at a different angle.
Yeah.
So you can't bolt the early look car straight on. You'd have to change the whole front.
They also want the older 911 feel with the rear suspension rather
the
than
trailing arms.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah. No, so I was just going to say that there are a lot of people that think they want the 993.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Then there's a slight look of disappointment when they've, because they are such an old car. And that's then when we put the, say to drive a 997 GTS, and that's today's modern classic, and that's because it obviously looks like the big brother of the 993, same designer and things. So, so a lot of people now are buying that as their sort of modern classic car.
I just wondered whether, a 996, an early 996, I'm guessing is a lot less than half the price of a late 993 or any 993. Is there, not turbos or GT cars because we know they have different engines, but on normal sort of 996s and I guess early 997s where there are known issues with the engine, are those issues overblown? Are those cars actually sort of hidden gems or are they cars to actually avoid? And I guess they may not even be the sort of cars that you would see very many of.
We'd love to, it is the entry level 911 now. It's because it's half the price of a SC or 3.2 Carrera or any. They used to be the entry cars. Yes. An old SC was a sort of £15,000 car or whatever. Yeah. Sadly, we don't see many of them that have a continuous history, that have the provenance, and don't need a restoration for us to get for us to put our warranties on and be proud of the cars. So most of the cars that we see, or take in part exchange, we end up having to trade. But occasionally we'll find a gem that has been looked after, and we've sold a few of the 40th edition cars. So I guess a 3.4 probably no. I probably would say we're not likely to be selling that car again.
Yes.
But who knows in the future? But the 3.6 engine was obviously safer.
Yes.
And we sell those. We sell, and obviously there's a similar engine in the early 997.
Yes. Yeah.
But early 997s are quite good value at the moment.
Yeah. And presumably, if someone was considering a 996, you would just say, do you know what? If you can, have the 997 instead.
Yeah. I think if we were to recondition a 996. It would end up, we'd be out asking the same price as we would for a 2005 997. So we tend to, and if we sell the 997s, obviously there's a little cloud above those with bore scoring and things that people worry about. I always say to people, look, just factor in extending the warranty for the whole time you own it. And then all the time that they bring it back for service, we can just put a new warranty on every year. Yeah. So it's just, if you just looked at that as part of the ownership costs, it's just over £1,000 a year for that warranty, and that our warranty would cover rebuilding the engine if it had bore score problems 2 or 3 years down the line.
Would you do that yourselves, or would you do it with somebody else? Do you do restoration work or rebuilding work, or are you mainly...
We do the engine rebuilds. Yeah, we do all of that. We don't do the engineering. There's a couple of companies that sort of modify the blocks on those so it doesn't come and happen again, because it's something to do with the water system. Porsche never sort of put their hands up to it, but apparently and it only happens with certain journeys and certain customers and the way they warm the car up. But there's a hot spot that goes, it's always the same cylinder that picks up first. So the engineering companies, they redirect the water around the water jacket. Apparently, I'm not quite sure how they do that.
Yeah, sure.
So we'd send the block away and have the engineering done. But we do engines and gearboxes. Yeah.
Do you still do older stuff? Do you do F-Series and G-Series cars?
Yeah, we're just rebuilding a 2.2S at the moment. We've just done an engine and a colour change for someone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love 356s, so we always have a few of those around us. So, yeah.
People will want to know what you see in your crystal ball over the next few years. Do you see any trends coming our way? Do you see any cars that are going to sort of rise or fall in demand or value?
There's always like last of cars, and you think it's interesting at the moment that the last of the normally aspirated 991s are making a little bit, price wise, a little bit dearer than an early 3-litre turbo.
I think I'd rather have a turbo one.
Would you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I like that little 3-litre.
It's really good, and it's amazing the sound that they've got from it.
Yeah.
But it's a more complex car.
Yeah. Okay.
So when we have them in, they're starting to have. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the turbos and there's quite a lot of electrical sensors on them and things like that. So I think the 3.8 engines are simpler cars.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's. I mean, the numbers of the later cars are huge numbers. So I don't see the same price rises as some of the lower. You've got to consider the when you look at 997s, and that's probably the last car where there were low production numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
There's not a shortage of 991 and 992.
No, by no means.
Should we talk a bit about racing?
Yeah.
Because, Mark, I don't know where this comes from. By the sounds of it, everything I've read, every person I've spoken to tells me that you're a hell of a driver. Were you? Did you race in your youth? Or
No.
Was this later in life?
Later. Yeah, I mean, it was in my 20s, I think. Started with 2CV racing.
Wow. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, did a few of the 24-hour races. And things.
Cool.
Yeah, learned how to slipstream.
Yeah, no, I think it's just, obviously, it's. We've been lucky. I've always said it's promotion, but it's been lucky. So when we started Paragon in '93, I was in the Beetle Cup, and then we raced at some meetings where the Porsche Club Championship were. So, as Andrew knows, when you're at these race meetings, you wander around the paddock looking at other things that you could race, don't you? Always, you're enjoying what you're doing, but you're always looking at what everyone else is doing as well. So I had a good wander around the Porsche paddock at Donington in '94, and then I actually followed. There's a company called Jazz Porsche, and they used to run a guy called Robert Babacan, a Greek guy, and his car was bright orange 3.2 Carrera with Zorba written across the bonnet diagonally. And I did a whole 100-mile, with my Beetle on the trailer. I was following their van and trailer for 100 miles down the M1, and it's subliminal advertising, isn't it? And then actually my first 911, which I've still got, 911 race car, I bought via Jazz from Steve Winter.
What was it?
It was an SC, 1978 SC.
Yeah.
Which we later converted to a 3.2 Carrera.
Yeah.
Because that was you could run up at the front of the grid with a 3.2 Carrera. So I've still got that car. So that started in '94, and I've raced Porsches every season since then.
So you've done 30 years of racing Porsches.
Yeah,
that's how you get good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do it for a long time.
So the first time you raced, I mean, I guess you're coming out of Beetles, then the whole sort of rear engine thing probably wasn't. It was all probably a bit more familiar to you than for most people. But is there a particular technique for getting a 911 to go fast around the track? Is it the same technique required to get a 911 to go fast down the road? Is it all about slow in, fast out?
I think when you look at the professional Porsche race drivers, the Porsche specialist, it was a skill to drive a 911.
Yeah.
Now when you look at Carrera Cup, quick guys, in single seaters are quick in Carrera Cup, but they weren't back in the day. You could put a really fast guy in a 911 and he just
wouldn't know what's going on.
No, it took you had to be experienced of trying to. It's all to do with weight transfer. Well, it was in those days, like 2-litre cuppies and things.
I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah, you've got to introduce. I mean, you should on all cars, but you sort of have to introduce the brakes, get the weight on the front, and then you can get in hard on the brake pedal.
Yeah.
And then when you're coming off the brakes, and you've got to, slowly introduce the, to get the car to squat, and then you can introduce the full throttle sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's all about making sure that you don't have these massive weight transferences forwards or rearwards, which to unsettle the car.
Don't surprise the car.
Yeah, you've got to, which you have to do with other cars, but just a lot more so with an earlier 911. You've got to put it on his nose, and whilst it's got some weight on the nose, you've got to get all the steering done before it realises it's, before it sort of levels out and then starts to understeer.
What's the most fun 911 you've raced?
I think my GT2 at the moment is probably the best. I've got a 993 GT2 that I'm doing it's called Endurance Racing Legends on the Peter Auto thing.
How much power?
And that's great. About 550.
Yeah.
1150 kilos.
Yeah.
And really short. You forget, I didn't think it when I used to watch those cars, but the wheelbase, they're almost square because they're quite wide.
Yeah.
The track and wheelbase, it's, but yeah, I love that car. I mean,
manageable lag?
Yeah, it's good. It's twin turbo. So
of course, yeah.
So they're good. Yeah. But obviously H pattern and.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But you also race in the 2 litre Cup.
Finished with that now, but I did that for 2 or 3 years. Yeah, so James Turner.
And did you win it?
Yes, 2019.
How good a driver are you, Andrew, if you win the 2 litre Cup?
Well, I think the 2 litre Cup. There used to be a race series for all sorts of cars called U2TC, under 2 litre touring cars, and that was always regarded to be the most competitive form of racing or classic racing series. But that kind of went off the boil, and then I think it became 2 litre Cup. I think it was people who were racing these very early FIA spec short wheelbase 911s. And I mean, I've watched some of it. I mean, it's absolutely sensationally close.
Yes.
Very committed, very full on racing, with people producing some incredibly cars that have been tuned to within an inch of their lives and more.
Yeah.
And I think that is now, or certainly was, when you were doing it, the most competitive historic race series of them all, I would say.
Yeah, and because of the tracks that they go to, they're all Grand Prix tracks or ex-Grand Prix tracks.
Yeah.
So long straights, and the cars aren't particularly, the windscreen's quite upright, aren't they?
Yes.
They're not masses of power. So if you get in someone's slipstream down the straight, you've got to be a couple of seconds away before you can get away from them, if you like. So it's quite interesting.
So it keeps the field tight.
Yeah, it keeps the field tight. Yeah. And then obviously a controlled tyre, so that's good as well. And long races, they're an hour and a half.
And you see the onboard footage from these things, and the cars are always sliding around. They're always moving, and you've always got them right on the edge of grip, haven't you, through corners?
Yeah, and exactly as Andrew said, I've got a Cortina as well. So as Andrew said, it's you. If you drive them too sideways, it's slow. And if they're not sideways at all, it's slow. So it's real slow.
There's a very precise slip angle.
Same as a Cortina, Sometimes you come out of the corner, and if it leads onto the back straight and you just get slightly too much oversteer, the revs drop 150 revs, and you know that you're going to be overtaken by a couple of cars. You've got to do it all again.
So how much power are you getting out of a 2 litre engine now?
Nearly 200, just off 200.
Single plug?
Single plug, yeah.
On carbs?
And they rev to 8,000 revs. On Solexes as well, which weren't the most reliable carburettor. But
wow.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys, including a guy called Adam that looks after our engines, or still does, but not my 2 litre now. And they've just got it, they really understand those cars. Still on contact breaker points, they won't let you go electronic ignition. So poor little points are bouncing.
You're still on points?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I also have to ask you about another Porsche you used to race, the ultimate Group C Porsche. You had that car, 1989 originally, but up to sort of 92 specification. 962, which you used to race.
Yeah, it's the fastest 962
that there ever was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just fantastic. And it's weird actually, because it's coincidence that my GT2 now has the same livery. It's that FAT.
Yes.
Yeah. Which was, you drove the 962, didn't you?
I did, yes, in the wet.
Yes.
I can remember you were, because I think you were shaking it down because you were going to go and do the Le Mans Classic in it with Derek, Derek Bell.
Yeah.
And obviously I can remember driving it myself, but I think what I remember almost more was Derek getting out of it for the first time. And he was like a sort of 8-year-old. He was sort of leaping around the pit. He was so stoked. He was so happy. He was having such a great time. And then I think something happened and you couldn't do the race at Le Mans or whatever.
Yeah, we had just a water pump failure.
Yeah.
Which was really annoying because, those cars don't have all the sensors that modern cars have. So by the time we realised it had already melted partially melted some of the piston rings or something. So it was still running, but it wasn't going to work. So it's a shame.
What I remember about that car was, I mean, it was quite daunting because obviously it wasn't my car, and obviously it was. I mean, how much sort of power would that have had?
About 650.
About 650 in the wet at Donington. But actually, it was such a. It wasn't. It probably is difficult to drive if you're driving it the way that you drive it, fast enough to sort of win races. But to get in it and just drive around Donington in the wet, I thought it was amazingly straightforward and
it
not
was
frightening.
really well mannered car. It was. You just had to believe in the car.
Yes, trust it.
Yeah,
it will grip.
I had some fun with it, and we had some success with it. I never really. I much prefer mechanical grip. I don't really. I've never. That's the only aero car that I've sort of raced, and I never really understood it. I've just sort of had to sort of argue with yourself and think, well, no, this is a fifth gear corner, and you don't need to lift or whatever. But it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, because you're not feeling it.
No.
You're not feeling the grip. You
No.
just have to tell yourself, well, there's this much aero, therefore it will do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's weird because actually the hardest thing with that car, we once raced it at Brands Hatch, and Druids is the most difficult corner because you've got these springs that are ready for 2,000 kilos of downforce or something.
Yeah.
So it's got completely the wrong springs on. It's still got 650 horsepower, but you're now in second gear with no aero.
Yeah.
And you come out and
a spool diff.
Yeah, so you just have to tell yourself there's oil on the exit of Druids because that's how it feels. It literally just wants to spin, and you can look really silly. Either spinning coming out the pit lane or spinning coming out. Once you're in third, definitely fourth and fifth gear, you've just got so much aero, you just have to believe in it. And it's never really half throttle anywhere in those gears. It's always just foot to the floor. Yeah.
Bloody hell. What's the most fun you can have racing a Porsche? Where are you? What's the car? What are the conditions? What kind of race?
I guess the reason I've done 2 Litre Cup is because if you win a race with 45, there were 46 cars when we were at Spa on one race, but quite often there were over 40 cars. If you win that race,
that's some very serious drivers.
Yeah, you feel you've done well. Obviously, what I would have loved to have done would be win a Super Cup race. I think that would be the ultimate thing. I haven't ever done a round of that, but I think that for me that was the 2 Litre Cup was as close as I got to a one make series in 911s.
Yeah.
But I've got an old 964 Super Cup car that raced in '93. Mike Haseman drove it in '93, and that was the first ever year that Porsche did Super Cup. So that something like that I would have loved to have done in period.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean any I think with the GT2 that I've got, there was a dozen of us that if we all went to the same meetings with there's 12 993 GT2s entered. So we've got our own little race amongst
a little race by make race series within there.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. But
Bloody hell, that sounds like fun. We need to wrap this one up quite soon, Andrew. Is there anything else you want to discuss?
Have you raced at the Nürburgring?
No, we took the Group C car to the Grand Prix track, but never. I've done one passenger lap at the Nürburgring with Henry Pearman in a Boxster.
Right.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Just one of the days. One of the.
Are you not tempted to go and do some old timer or?
It's one of those things I need to go and learn it, and it just seems like a big effort to go and learn it. But I will. A friend of mine does the Manthai days there, and he's invited me on some of those. So I think I need to just go and. I don't know the best way to learn it. I guess in something that's not that powerful.
Yes.
What's your road car?
Well, GT2 RS is GT3 RS. I've been using
The current one.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you make of it?
I love it. Yeah, really good.
What settings do you have your dampers in? Do you have everything wound all the way back?
Well, I was lucky enough to go out to Barcelona and spend a bit of time with Jörg Bergmeister.
Yes.
With the Porsche thing, and he said
he's a dude.
Actually, the damper settings don't make as much difference as the diff setting. So I've been playing with that when I've taken it on track, and you really can get rid of understeer by messing around with the diff.
Yeah.
The damper settings, I haven't really played with that much.
But on the road, I've found that if you just soften them all off, it just becomes very compliant and actually rides better than a standard GT3.
Right. Okay. I've been running the tyre pressures lower,
Yeah.
which makes a big difference with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've bought it to do track days. I've done 6 already, so I am actually using it, because you do feel like when you're on the road you have to sort of explain to everyone why you're driving that car with that wing on.
Yeah, of course.
It's a bit embarrassing sometimes.
Yeah.
And do you run it on Cup 2Rs?
It was delivered on Pirellis,
Yeah.
so I'm still on those, but I think I'm going to go to the Michelin Cup tyres. I don't know about ours. They don't last very long, do they?
They don't last
No,
very long.
it's not worth it. It's not
I think
worth
I'll
it.
just go for the standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the
Cup
problem
2,
is
yeah.
we go off and do these 2-day RMA days at Spa,
Yeah.
and you've got to drive home at the end of it, haven't you?
Well, exactly. Yeah. And if it's in any way wet,
Yeah.
then you can find yourself in all
Scary,
sorts of.
yeah.
So is there to you, is there sort of an ultimate iconic 911? If you could only have one 911 to do everything you ever want to do in a 911, is there one which really stands out as being what we would describe as, I guess, peak 911?
I think we mentioned it. I think I'd have a 2-wheel drive GTS 997.
Wow.
That's
really
really
as
interesting.
as one car, because
Yeah.
it's sort of bang in the middle of everything I love about 911s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, so it has that analog feel. It's got enough performance. You could track it if you wanted to.
Yep.
It's beautifully balanced, isn't it?
Just
in
does it
terms of-
all.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
totally understand.
Yeah.
I really get that. All right, we need to wrap this one up. But Mark Sumpter, thank you for
Thank you.
joining us. Thank you
Thanks
for
for
coming
having
in. Yeah, Paragon Porsche. So if you're in the market, have a look at what Paragon Porsche have got on the forecourt. I will remind you all that as a podcast listener, we're offering you a 15% discount on the cost of subscribing to our multi-award-winning ad-free online car magazine. Head to the-intercooler.com, or there'll be a link in the description. And at checkout, just use the coupon code POD15 to get a 15% discount for life. Okay, thank you again, Mark. That was really good fun, and we'll be back with another episode next week.
Great. Thanks.
Cheers.